This week, we're going to talk about preacher, teacher, leader. One of my favorite topics out there when it comes to limiting self beliefs. It's one of the first things I ever put down before I started writing my book. The first book I started writing was called Hustle, Struggle, Grind, The 13 Lessons of Life. And in my life, I look at the world around me and I break it down to threes. Everything to me is a three, right? When it comes to sales and people's interactions, for example, I always think of sometimes, always, never. There are the people that will always buy from you, always follow you, always listen to you. There are the people that will sometimes buy from you and listen to you. And there are people that will never, ever understand you or get you. And that's all right. And what I've realized in that lesson, for example, is a lot of people out there want to go after the never people, and they don't spend enough time on the always people, and certainly don't even know who the sometimes people are. So that's an example that I picked up through life, and it's a generally understood example. And then for me, I've taken other ideals and ideas and I've broken it into three. Everything in my life revolves around three. And then there's all this science behind understanding the power of three. Our whole system is based on the power of tens, right? And the Romans were based on, who was it? Based on 12s. It was the Romans. And there another society, Babylon's maybe, based on 12 and 360. That's why we have 360 degrees and 90 degrees and 180s and 45s, right? It's based on the number. Everything in my life is based on three. I did a speech years ago, and it was 90 ideas in 90 minutes, 9 speakers, 10 ideas. And in that speech, I said 10 is a big number. It takes both hands. And so instead, I found 3 ideas with 3 words each, and then I added the last word. And that word was do, which is the most important word of all of them. Yes, DT, FT, do the fucking thing, because even after we have all these great, amazing, beautiful words, hard work is typically the answer. So let's get into teacher, preacher, leader. I keep reversing the order. I really want to go preacher, teacher, leader to explain things in a systematic way. The way I put it out is you ain't got to be a preacher to preach, a teacher to teach, or a leader to lead. If they're praying, you're preaching. If they're learning, you're teaching. If you're following you, you're leading. This comes down to a couple of lessons in life that I've learned along the way. First off, and this is the very surface thing, and it's something I vehemently believe in, titles are bullshit. Titles inflate people's egos and also compromise other people of the best ideas. I used the line recently, don't confuse your education with my intelligence. Although you may have this fancy degree, you may have this fancy title, that also can limit how much information you take in and who you take it in from. On the inverse, there are some people that give themselves self-limiting beliefs, myself included. I told myself for years I wasn't good enough to own a business because I didn't have a college degree. Once I finally got the college degree, I realized I didn't need it along the whole way. I had only convinced myself I needed it. In the military, often we have rank and structure, we have chain of command, and yet the best leaders are the ones that will listen to the Joes boots on ground because they're the ones with the best ideas. It's the leader's responsibility to make the decision, and yet it's not their responsibility to have all the answers. The best leaders out there have the best questions. And then when it comes to teaching, we can learn from everywhere and anybody around us. I heard early in my career, for every mentor I have that's 10 years older than me, I need a mentor that's 10 years younger than me. And once I started realizing that there's power and knowledge all around us, I started realizing what people have, what they hold, and what their end state and purpose is. And then I thought about conversations. Conversations come down to 3 things. They're there to convert you, to convince you, or to consult with you. And so then I take the 3 C's compared to preacher, teacher, leader, keeping them in line here, right? And I think where's the similarities in here? And then how does language affect that? I think about preachers, for example, right? Evangelical. What they are ultimately wanting to do is convert you and change your values and beliefs. And a preacher is a great one, right? They're religious in nature, and certainly there's some good. But there's also politicians out there that want to change your values and beliefs. There's the media out there that wants to change the narrative. So you change, again, your values and beliefs. They convert you to now you have to be a Catholic or a Protestant. You have to be Democrat or Republican. And yet you don't have this idea. You think they're leading you, and really they're not leading you to where you want to go. They're preaching to convert you to where they want you to go. They're looking to change your underlying values and beliefs. And it's an opportunity for you to look back and say, is that what I want in my life? And conversely, when I'm giving advice to other people, when I'm giving recommendations to other people, Am I pursuing them to change their values and beliefs based off of my own perspective? Are my insecurities now coming out on them and converting them in such a way that could be negatively impacting them? Am I not listening actively because I'm trying to have their values and beliefs changed? Second person in this equation, the leader. The leader's ultimate action when it comes to leading people is convincing. The huge power of persuasion in convincing people to change their actions and activities is a leader's key principle. That's what they're in charge of. When you are leading people, are you convincing them to change their actions and activities, or are you merely discussing ideals? When you look to leadership, are you actually getting people that challenge you in your actions or your ideals or the outcomes? What is actually occurring? And is that the type of relationship or conversation you want to have? Often there's a challenge with significant others, spouses, for example. One spouse will come home and complain about work. It's the classic example. So they come home and complain about work, and then the other spouse wants to start solving the problem. They want to convince them, this is what you need to do. You need to go in there and give them the business, or you got to change your mindset. And in actuality, they don't need someone at that point to convince them otherwise. They don't need a leader. They need someone that can hear the perspective and maybe give them some insight. They're not looking to problem solve. And now finally, the teacher. The teacher is the one that gives you unadulterated information. They're there to consult with you, to be unbiased. And that's one of the challenges we have in our society now too, is that teachers often start convincing people or leading people in areas that's not what they're hired to be. The obligation of a teacher is to give people information they otherwise wouldn't have. Look at you in your life. Do you often disqualify what information you have because you don't have the education necessary, but you have the information? Years ago, I applied to my alma mater. I talked about coming in and teaching business classes. And they said, well, you don't have a master's degree. And I said, why do I need one? They said, well, in order to teach at the bachelor level, you need a master's degree. You need one education level higher. I said, but I know more about business than the people you have teaching business. And their structure, that didn't work with them. That didn't align with their values. Now, that school has since closed. And I would argue that had they been more involved in the community, had they been less rigid in their approach to educating individuals and teaching people, consulting with them, giving the information they're seeking out, they might still be in business to this day. However, they were so consumed with titles and pieces of paper. Education is not the same as intelligence. And yet, us as humans, we often want to take things and put them in boxes and cubes and say, oh, I need to listen to that person because they're a politician, or they're the media and they're really smart. Oh, I got to listen to that person because they're a really good leader, and look at their title and look how much money they make. I need to listen to this person because they're a teacher, they're an educator. Hold on, where's the best information coming from? Because you ain't got to be a preacher to preach, a leader to lead, or a teacher to teach. Who out there has the best plan? Who has the best information? What is stopping you from putting yourself out there? What's stopping you from sharing your ideals with the world? When I come on this program every week, or I do my Trash Talk Business podcast, I very much want to be a teacher. I'm not out here telling you you're wrong if you do that. I'm not going to change your values and beliefs. My goal isn't to convince you to do the thing, get off your ass. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the answers as to how I see the world. I'm going to teach you and consult with you, absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you say, hey, Andy, your system is full of shit, I never want to listen to your program again, I say, sounds good. Because I respect, going back to the top, right, the sometimes, always, never people. I'm not in the business here today to convince you that what I'm saying is gospel. I'm not going to convince you to buy my book and screaming from the mountaintops. My job here is merely to consult. This is the way I see the world, and what can you take out of it? Because I'm willing to have my ideas out there. I'm willing to have people challenge my ideas. Last week, I talked about the art of public speaking and this art form that I absolutely love. I think about Dave Chappelle when he won the Mark Twain Award, and the art that he had being a stand-up comedian and telling jokes. He's a stand-up comedian, yet he has more power and influence than I would say most politicians. Joe Rogan's a podcaster, and he can move the needle and make or break someone's career based off of just having him on his program because he's interested in having a conversation with them. No agenda whatsoever. He's not guaranteed to make anybody $1 million. And yet millions of people listen to Joe Rogan. And once you're on Joe Rogan, you've kind of made it. And Joe Rogan doesn't have some big media conglomerate. He doesn't have a bachelor's degree or master's degree or doctoral in communication or broadcasting. He's a guy that had a podcast. He just started talking to his buddies. And then people gravitated towards him. He saw an opportunity. Let's have a conversation. Let's learn something together. And if people happen to learn something and change their life, well, good on them. He had no agenda. In a world full of agendas, in a world that is polarized, here you have a guy who's a stand-up comedian who is inquisitive. And he took an art form, stand-up comedian, paired it with a little podcasting, brought some guests on and had some good conversations, and he moves the needle more than any other individual in our society right now from a media standpoint. He wields more power than anybody else. Had he get into religion or politics and try to start convincing you that his way was the best way, you wouldn't listen to him. You listen to him because he's there to teach. And when you let your walls down, you let your ego down, you let your ideas flow, and you invite people in, they're more receptive. We can all see a bullshit salesman from 1,000 miles away. When you take the time to have conversations with people, give your ideals, listen to what they have to say, respond with what's best for them by responding, by listening and proactively asking probing questions, then you can lead them. You can teach them. You might even be able to give them a little bit of religion, a little preaching on values and beliefs. Once you let the walls down, once you let people in. And so my challenge to you this week is very simple. Look at the relationships you have with all the information you take in, whether it's from people, social media, family members. What information serves you? Who out there is preaching to you in a place that you don't or aren't looking for that type of information? Who's leading you? Is that something you want to be like? And finally, what are you reading and watching and learning about every day? I often talk about start, stop, continue methodology of change. Again, threes. Stopping is the simplest of the three. Stop the behavior that does not serve you, and yet is the most difficult because now we have to break bad habits. So simple techniques that I do on YouTube. I watch a lot of my content on YouTube, as I know some of you do here. I got rid of Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, anything that was overly political. I unsubscribed and I blocked on YouTube. Why? Because I get sucked into it as much as everybody else. And now that I blocked it or unsubscribed or whatever the button is, I don't see it anymore. I have people in my life that will preach to me and tell me how wrong I am for running a business and how I need to go out and get a job. And I've heard that for years. I don't listen to them anymore. I also have self-doubt in my head. Andy, you're not ready for this. Andy, you haven't earned it yet. Andy, what are you doing with your life? And I remind myself, I don't need a title. I don't need permission. I don't need somebody else's perspective to go out and do what I think is right in the world today. So this day, this is your mission. Should you choose to accept it, find the things you need to stop because they're not serving you. Continue to push yourself and challenge yourself and consume what it is that is serving you. And when you do those two things, you can then earn the opportunity, the time, the space, the resources to say, what do I want to start doing? And how do I get there? Now that I've got rid of the bullshit, what do I need to start doing? And my challenge to you is look at the relationships you have. Look at the way that people talk, interact with you. The best people do more of that. Add more people that are like the best people and get rid of all the rest. As always, life is a real simple 3-step process. Do the fucking thing. Tell the fucking world. And show the fuck up.